All right, so we're going to continue on a series that Pastor Wendy had started on discipleship and Yeshua. We're going to cover a new topic of obedience, and I know this is a topic that can get people a little bit uptight because obedience comes with kind of a loaded term because it's been abused, and people have abused their positions of authority and things like that. So I'm going to ask you to be a little tolerant, and we're going to try and clarify what this means and do it in a more godly way and not be trapped by some of these pitfalls that come with this kind of a topic. We have covered ears to hear, the first step of true discipleship. And we're going to come back to ears to hear because ears to hear is a key part of obedience. We're going to cover that a little bit. Step 2 is getting wisdom. And in this case, when it comes to obedience, wisdom means generally not thinking too highly of yourself. That's a form of wisdom. And not thinking you've got it all figured out. That someone else doesn't have something to give to you or teach you. When it comes to discipleship, we've often, if you look it up online and you look up topics, you're going to find most people are talking about discipleship as following Christ. And discipleship is following Christ. But the term or the type of discipleship that we're talking about today and the ultimate pattern of discipleship is following a teacher who helps you follow Christ. Walking with a rabbi, walking with someone who has walked the road before you, who can show you the way and help you avoid the pitfalls. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about discipleship. It's not about going in alone and saying, well, I've read my Bible, I know who Christ is, I know all about it, I've got this figured out. We're gonna find out ways to relate that. But so a disciple is a Talmud. Again, this is review. A student who attaches himself to a rabbi in order to learn how to live the Torah, not merely studying it academically. It's not about your head knowledge. Now, the head knowledge is good and great if you can tie it in and understand how these things relate to what we do in life. But ultimately, the goal is to walk it out better, to walk better with God, and to help us find people in our lives that are ahead of us in our path. And that usually doesn't mean your best friend. It usually doesn't mean your spouse. Although there are times when a husband and wife come to Christ at separate times, or one has come from a background of being raised in the church and understanding and learning, when the other doesn't. And there are times when you can have some discipleship through your spouse, but generally this is not a relationship of equals. It's a relationship of someone who is mentoring you and helping you. Just like someone who wants to be a better businessman finds someone who has established a good business and has failed at businesses and then succeeded at businesses, and finding someone who is ahead of you on that path to help you avoid making the same mistakes and come to success faster. So, what are we currently disciples of? We've covered this, our jobs. We're often disciples of social media. It's not clicking? Oh, sorry. I don't know why this stops showing me what's up there when we have things that fade in. And we're sometimes disciples of friends. And I've covered that a little bit already, but we do not want to be disciples of our own understanding. We want to be disciples. We ultimately should want to be disciples who are finding people we can learn from. So we have characteristics of a disciple. We've covered a lot of this. Desire for wisdom, the commitment or dedication it takes, and today we're covering obedience. But there's devotion, there's reverence, there's discipline and diligence, humility, moral integrity, willingness to be corrected, community responsibility, and fear of God. Without covering too much of this again, I don't know if this series is going to cover every one of these. Some of them are fairly self-explanatory. But when it comes to the ideas of obedience, and we covered a hard term last week, covenant. that was a little off, a sidetrack from this particular series, but it fits right in. When we hear these words, some people run. Some people shrink back. Some people get defensive because these are loaded terms that have often been misused, and people come from backgrounds where it has been misused, and they have been misused in these ways. So, but what we're talking about today is not a power play. It's about the idea of preparing us and training us better so that we can do better. The Bible, Scripture, is full of paradoxical concepts, and we're going to deal with some of them today in ways like Bible says, surrender to gain your freedom. Isn't that crazy? Die so you might live. Give so you can have abundance. Humble yourself and be lifted up. Aren't these kind of crazy things that go backward, they are upside down from the way the world teaches us to think? And in many ways, obedience is one of these ways that's upside down from the way the world teaches us to think. But when we practice them, we find out Scripture is telling us the truth. So, this one, obey so that you can have authority, strength, and power in your life. Isn't that weird? Obey, surrendering your will so that you can have strength, power, and authority. That's really bizarre, but when you start understanding it, when you start practicing it, you start realizing how these things come about. So these things don't come without a covenant relationship involving obedience. We all are under someone. We are at work, we have a boss. Even if you own the company, you answer to the IRS, you answer to your customers, you answer to people. None of us is without someone above us. The key is having that right relationship and understanding how that works, and understanding when we've talked about this many times, in the military, in the sheriff's department, in the police department. An officer has authority because they are under someone else who gives them that authority. An elected official has authority because we've granted them that authority to speak for, represent us. And in many ways, these are covenant relationships. When an officer they have full expectation, others are running to their aid. They're battle buddies. They have the full expectation that their commanding officers will have their back, will fight for them when they get it, when are under investigation. Was it justified that you shot this person? Was it justified that you hit them back? They came after you and you tackled them and put them down and they got injured. Their face got scraped against the ground, whatever it was. Was it justified? Do your superior officers have your back? And this is the kind of relationship we're talking about with a teacher and a disciple. The teacher has your back. The teacher covers you. And it's much like having a coach in a sporting event or a sporting context. No athlete goes alone. But the coach has their back. The coach gives them instructions. The coach gives them commands. Go out and do this. Go fill that position. And it's expected that the student, the athlete in this case, follows those commands. And it's not about the coach having power and authority over them and exercising dominance. It's about making them the best athlete they can be and producing a team that can be the best team they can be. It's not about the coach's ego, although there is ego in winning. I admit that. But we're coming back to ears to hear, the first step to true discipleship. This is a key point in obedience because the word hearing in Hebrew is also tied with obeying. Listen or hear and obey, I put in parentheses, reference 8085 in Hebrew, It's pronounced Shema or Shema. We often say Shema. To hear intelligently, often with implication of attention and obedience, etc. It means hear and obey. We don't have a word, I think, like that in English. We have words that kind of mean that, but not as concise, not as direct. Causatively, to tell or command. Go do this. Shema, listen to me. Like a parent telling to a child, listen to me. I am telling you to do something. It has that authority of command. But it also has the authority of, hey, if you do it like that, it's not going to work so well. Do it like this. Does that make sense? Okay. An example of Shema, we say it every week. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Now, I unredacted it because the translators have taken God's name out of things, and I put God's name back. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Yahweh is one. It's a funny saying, but I want to tie it in a little bit to what we're talking about in obedience and following a teacher and having many people follow the same teacher and being in covenant with each other as we do it. Because Eloheinu is the kind of a possessive form, Yahweh your God. It comes from the word Elohim, which is a plural word. And it baffles a lot of people because we serve one God and yet the word is plural like it's gods. But our God is one. And it often gets translated, I think very accurately, as Lord of hosts, God of many. And because God has many followers, he has hosts of angels who follow his command, who go to battle, the warriors in the spiritual kingdom, and we in the physical and the spiritual are also his and follow him. When God sends a messenger, that messenger speaks for God. That messenger, that angel, or that person has the authority of the one who sent them. So it appears like there can be many. God has many presences, but he's one God. But we are to act the same way. We are many. We are supposed to be of one mind. A married couple are two people, but they are one. Does that make sense? All right. So when it comes to obeying, we're going to talk about that. To be a disciple literally means to be a learner or follower. Now, this is another area where it can be hard for people because when we are a disciple of a teacher, the idea is that teacher is following Christ. We are following that teacher, and in doing so, we are following Christ as well. We are not putting that teacher up on a pedestal in the place of Christ, but we are following that teacher who teaches us how to follow him better. Does that make sense? The person who has walked that road before us and that we can follow in their footsteps. And it doesn't mean that person is perfect. But there are many ways. It is a type of covenant relationship. And different covenant relationships can be for a specific time. They can be for a lifetime. When a man approaches the king, or in the case of David, before he was king, he had men in covenant with him that were helping him when he was being chased by Saul, when he was being hunted. And it is a type of covenant relationship. I will follow you. I am with you to the end. I pledge my allegiance to you, my sovereign. These are powerful words. But when we do that, the king then feels justified. He feels like he can trust you to place you in a higher position, a commander, a general, in charge of his finances, whatever it is, because he knows you are in covenant with him and you will walk with him and you will not betray him. You're not in it for the wrong reasons. You're not in it to be a general. You didn't make covenant so he could make you a general. It wasn't a transactional relationship. It was a relationship that says, I will do what it takes. It says, well, if you're going to do what it takes, I can trust you. And I'm going to put you in a more trusted position. Does that make sense? All right. So we have a couple people in our kahal that have just recently gone through the post academy, the police academy, if you would call it. In a way, that's kind of a covenant relationship. They come under a teacher for a time. It's a limited time. It has a limited contract. But it's not directly what's the word? I can't think of the word all of a sudden. I don't know. It's not transactional. Sorry, the word just like blew out of my mind. It's not directly where you're paying the instructor to give you to give you something. The instructors are employees of the county. In many cases, they're already officers serving, but they're teaching you what they know so that you can become a better officer. They're a coach. And they come in and they teach you what you need to know, knowing that you're going to get further training when you get on the street, when you get into a specific, whether that's the Mesa County Sheriff's Office or a different sheriff's office, different county, or a police officer, a police department. Sorry, the words. Wherever you end up going, you're going to get further training that's more specific. This is how we do things here, but you're already ready. You understand the basics. And so it becomes a type of limited contract covenant. You trust that they will teach you what you need to know, and they're going to ask you to do some very hard things. You're going to have to learn to fight. You're going to have to learn when to use your gun, when to use your taser, when to not use either one of them, when to use your voice, how to use your voice, how to stand. You're going to have to learn different things that convey the authority that you're going to be given and how to use that properly. When to turn your body cam on. That's a big thing. When the president promotes someone, whether it's a general, generals serve at the will of the president. He can demote them at any time. It's not a specific term, but it's the idea that you have earned a position of trust. And I understand that you know how to use your authority properly. You know how to lead men, and I'm going to put you in this position. And as long as you serve me well, I will keep you in that position. However, the next president may decide you're not the guy I want and put someone else in that position. The same comes with an ambassador. They serve at the will of the president. It's not a specific term, but it is a trusted position that, again, the president has the ambassador's back. The ambassador represents the president's will and the will of the people. Does that make sense? It's a trusted covenant, not a transactional relationship. When we elect a mayor, a congressman, it's the same kind of thing. So when you get into the idea of a covenant relationship or these kind of discipleship relationships, it's not the same kind of thing. You can start with a word study. You can look the word up. But you're going to have to look beyond the word to the concept. Because when a couple gets married, they pledge their lives to each other. But whether they use the word covenant or not, they are getting into a covenant relationship. Assuming they're getting married for the right reasons, with the right kind of relationship. Not everyone does. I understand that. But when I stood up and told Wendy, I promise to love, honor, and obey you. I promise to lift you up. I promise to have your back. I promise to walk with you through thick and thin. And she stands up and makes the same pledges to me. We are in a covenant relationship, whether or not we use the word covenant. Does that make sense? So if you just look for the occurrences of the word covenant, you're going to miss a lot of what it is, because there's covenant relationships throughout the Bible. All right, so the evidence of love and trust. Obedience is often described as the fruit of a relationship. How many times have we talked about roots and fruits rather than the root of it? A disciple obeys because they trust the character and wisdom of the teacher. It is considered faith in action. Obedience is where belief stops being an abstract concept and starts being a lived reality. All too often, Christianity is an abstract concept. We love as Jesus loved. We follow Christ, but do we really know what that means? And obedience is the proof of it. And James even said, faith without works is dead. You have to have the obedience. Otherwise, saying you believe means nothing. So it is the path to transformation. A disciple aims to become like their master. However, growth often requires doing things that feel counterintuitive or difficult at first. When the coach tells you, don't stand at the plate to bat, at baseball, don't stand like this, stand like this with your bat, it's going to feel awkward. Don't throw the ball like that, throw the ball like this. It feels awkward when you first learn it. But by doing it, by following the instruction and learning to do it right, you get more power in your throw. You get more power in your bat. You get the better ability not to be struck out. Relinquishing the ego. It requires humility to admit that one does not have the answers. Allowing the disciple to be molded by the teacher's expertise. By following a set of disciplines or commands, the disciple breaks out of old habits and forms new, better habits. All right? The practice of mastery. Much like an athlete obeys a coach's grueling regimen to gain a skill, a disciple obeys the spiritual principles being taught to gain better spiritual maturity. So alignment with a higher purpose. Obedience shifts the focus from the self to the mission. In a discipleship context, the master usually has a larger vision for the world. So in our particular context, we are hoping that many of you have a great vision for the world, a great vision for your community. But as a church, we are united for a larger vision. As a church, we have this idea that we are going to have certain influences in our community for good. That we will help back up our elected officials and pray for them. We will come together. And when we say we're from Beit Lechem, doors open because they know us. And even if they haven't met Eric, he shows up at a prayer meeting and he says, oh, I'm part of Beit Lechem. They say, I know who you are. I know your people. Come on in. Does that make sense? All right. So it creates synergy. When a group of disciples are obedient to the same set of values, they move in unison toward a common goal. All right. Relinquishing the ego. It requires humility to admit that one does not have all the answers. We already talked about that a little bit. Allowing the disciple to be molded. I don't know. I felt like I went backwards. Okay. People often reject this idea of covenant and obedience. This kind of relationship with a spiritual teacher. One reason, and I don't know that these are comprehensive list, but these are the most common reasons. Fear of giving up control. That you, like I said, lower yourself, humble yourself to be lifted up. But putting yourself under someone else's authority feels like you're diminishing yourself if you're not used to the concept. Fear of giving up control. Someone else will hurt them, and other people have done this. I know people have been hurt by authority. It can be in the church. It can be by parents. It can be by siblings. It can be by aunts and uncles. It can be by anybody, a boss at work. There's no limit to how people have abused authority and hurt people. There's fear of obligations. This will require things of me. If I pledge my allegiance to the king, he's going to ask me to do things, and I'll have to not do what I want to do. Does that make sense? And the same thing comes with any kind of leader. I don't want that job. They're just going to tell me what to do. Ego. I'm already an expert. I have nothing left to learn here. They don't have anything to teach me. And we often do that. And unfortunately, it's very common among people with a messianic mindset that they've got it figured out. They've read it. They've come to their revelation of understanding that's different from the church they grew up in or whatever, and they suddenly, I've got it figured out. I should be teaching it. I shouldn't be learning it anymore. We're all learning it. But I have overcome the world. Fear not. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. You are called to overcome. And I assume we all serve the same God, the God who has overcome. And that he gives us the authority and the power to overcome. We are not supposed to stay where we are. We're not supposed to wallow in our grief. There is a time and a season to grieve. There is a time and a season to be hurt. There is a time and a season to lick your wounds. And there's a time and a season to get back up and start getting back at the things you're supposed to be doing. You are called to overcome your nature, your fears, your baggage, all the things, the names you were called in grade school. If you're still worried about the names you were called when you were a kid, you're carrying baggage. It's not supposed to be something that holds you back in your adulthood. Does that make sense? And we can apply that to many ways. If you were abused in any way, I am so sorry that you have been abused, and I don't want this place to be a place where you find abuse in any way. However, you can't continue to identify yourself as that abused person. If you're going to follow God, you have to say, I've been redeemed. I've been brought out of slavery. I have been brought out of this abusive situation, and now I am a child of the King, and it's time to learn to walk and talk like a child of the King and not like a child of the abuser. Does that make sense? All right. The parentheses thing down at the bottom, you can't do it alone. People don't overcome on their own as a general rule. I'm sure there are people who have. There's always exceptions to the rule. But the 99% rule is we can't do it without help. We'll get to it. The Great Commission in Matthew 28:19 says, go forth and make disciples, teaching them to observe and obey, is what it means, all that I have commanded you. Obedience is the goal of discipleship. Obedience is the goal of, I'm just going to read it, the goal of discipleship, transforming knowledge into lived practices. It's not about do this because I told you to, although sometimes that might be the words that come out. It's about do this so you can be better at what we're doing. Does that make sense? In the right kind of relationship. It's not about being obedient to the teacher because the teacher is your goal, is your person put on a high pedestal. And I think, okay, it's a different picture than I thought it was. The goal is follow me as I follow him. I will show you how to stay on the path. I will show you to avoid slipping and falling right here. I will show you where the handholds are. Does that make sense? Just like a coach or athlete has a relationship, a coach and athlete has a relationship, it makes you better. It is a duty of the student not to put okay, I've already covered all of that. The covenant relationship does not mean giving up who we are. It means being better at who we are. Just like Michaela and Larissa have gone through the academy, they were taught how to be police officers. They became better at being that. Michaela's still Michaela. She's still my sweet daughter. Larissa is still the wonderful person that she has always been. But she now understands how to walk in authority. Both of them do. They understand, and they're still learning how to be better police officers, but it shapes and molds them. Just like a coach teaches an athlete how to be a better athlete. I never was going to be the winner of the 100-yard dash. I was never a fast runner. I was a wrestler, not a runner. And that's just the way it goes. But no matter what I was coached with, I could learn to run. I maybe learned to like to run. I never really liked to run for the sake of running. But I was never going to be that star runner because I didn't have the natural talent. Some people do. But I did find that I have a kind of a natural talent for wrestling. Maybe it was all those years my brother and I were rolling on the ground fighting each other. I don't know. But this is a topic, again, that can be sensitive to people. If you're feeling like your guard is up, if you're feeling like running, if you're feeling like crawling under a blanket, whatever it is, I want to remind you that you are called to overcome these things. You are not supposed to let the issues of your past define who you will be. If you have had bad relationships, if you've gone through a bad divorce, if whatever, you are called to rise up and heal and be healthy and mature from that. Learn from it, absolutely. Learn good discernment. Learn how not to get into bad relationships. But that doesn't mean everyone's out to abuse you. Everyone's out to put you down, to keep you under their thumb. Because not everyone is. The key is wisdom and discernment to know how to do it. The evidence of authentic faith. Obedience exhibits discipleship by serving as visible evidence of an authentic claim of transformation. I want that to sink in a little bit. As Jesus modeled perfect obedience to the Father, in John 4:34 it says, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me." Philippians 2:8, obedient to the point of death. Disciples are called to follow his example. And again, I hope everyone in this room is a disciple of Christ. But we still need a coach. We all need someone to look at who's ahead of us on the path to know what to do right and what to avoid doing wrong. This obedience flows from love and trust in God, and I would say love and trust in each other, not legalistic effort. Distinguishing true followers from those who merely hear the word without doing it. And the reference there is James 1:22, if you want to read about what he said about those who are doers of the word and not hearers only. In essence, obedience manifests the quality of discipleship by proving that one's faith is alive, relational, and surrendered to Christ's lordship. Our faith is supposed to be relational. We are supposed to relate to each other well. We're supposed to relate to God well. It's not just head knowledge. It's not just all about how the tabernacle was put together and how many brass rings there were. There may be some interesting teachings in that, but it's more than that. It's so much more than that. Leading to spiritual growth and alignment with God's will. So following God requires training. I know I'm repeating, but I want this to sink in for anyone who's struggling with the concept. Those who don't put themselves in a covenant relationship with a trainer almost never overcome the things that hold them back. And I put in the word almost. I don't know anyone who's done it on their own. I only know people who have had a model to follow. But I will leave it open that there might be a few people out there who have done it on their own. They almost never achieve the promise of power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind comes from putting the past in the past, not letting it be the triggering things that hold you back. You can't have a sound mind if you're still upset about what your teacher said to you in 3rd grade. You can't. You've got to put it behind you. Because it will hold you back and it triggers you. Years ago, when I first got married, I had been in a company that was a profitable company. They were doing good things. I started out, I was just out of school and I was repairing things. I was repairing stuff people would send in. It was glorified calculator company. They had all these fancy calculators that did everything for construction. You know, you could figure out your rise and run and your hips and valleys on roofs and all the different things and how many board feet of lumber you need for a project. And it was just a few button strokes. It wasn't like a regular calculator. You hit a special button, you put in some numbers, and it was there. And they had real estate calculators. They had all kinds of different things. But I was repairing things in the office. I was repairing calculators people would send back, or I'd replace them or repair them, whatever. But they had good customer service. But eventually I was raised up to be in charge of not just the repairs, but the shipping department. And so I had to hire another guy to do repairs and train him and teach him, and then also run all the guys in the shipping and receiving and doing all the things. And then I fell in love. I got married, and the company had been going through layoffs. We went through, I don't know if anyone remembers, in the 1990s we had a recession that hit real estate and construction, the two biggest things this company dealt with. And they started having to cut back, and they started laying people off. And there was tension in the company about who was going to go next and what jobs were more valuable and who was necessary. And they finally announced they were done with all the layoffs. They were done. Everyone who was left had a solid job. And I got married, went on my honeymoon, and a week after I got back, I was laid off. They called me in, and I found out they hadn't laid me off because they knew that I was about to get married, and they didn't want to lay me off just before I got married. So they laid me off right after I got married. And I spent the first 3 months of being a newlywed looking for a job, being the new husband out of work. And it was tough. It was tough. We were in a recession. Everywhere I went, I was walking in applying for a job in a company that was laying people off left and right. I drove 2 hours in every direction trying to find work. And I got to the point where I could feel the death in the air when I'd walk into a company. And I could feel it hanging in the air. I still feel it when I fly into Orange County. I can feel the stress hanging in the air. You know, it's like, ooh, we're coming into the cloud of stress. You know, it's almost where the smog layer is. It's like, ooh, I feel everyone tense, you know, and you have to learn how to fight your way through the freeway again. And, you know, I still have a little bit of that in me when I drive, but I'd have to turn it back on when you have to bully your way when you change lanes. You know, I am coming over, give me way, you know. You have to do this or you won't survive. But going through all of this, I didn't realize that I had baggage. Feeling like I did hard work, I worked well, I was a good employee, I always had a good review, I was promoted to a step and could have possibly been promoted higher over time, and then I was laid off, just like that. And I found a new company eventually. I walked into a company and thought, oh my gosh, there's no death in the air. This is different. And it was fairly close to home. And I walked in and it had big windows and it was bright and sunny. It wasn't painted dark battleship gray everywhere. And there weren't boxes stacked up in all the hallways where you have to turn sideways and screw through them and all the different things that I had seen everywhere. And I walked up to this receptionist in the office to tell her I was here for the interview, and she was going to give me the paperwork you fill out every single time that duplicates everything you already gave them on your resume. And I looked to the left, and there's people rushing around between different desks and talking to each other, and I thought, it's a busy office, nice. I looked to the right, and there's this big open wing of empty desks. Ugh. What's happening over there? This doesn't feel like death, but it's got all the signs of the empty desk. And I said, so what's going on with all the empty desks? She goes, oh, well, that used to be another company. They folded, they moved out, and we just knocked this wall down and remodeled and filled all those desks, and we're hiring like crazy. I said, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm talking my way into this company, you know. I don't know what I need to do. And it was a change of career path. It was a change of everything for me. Switching from electronics and possibly electronics engineering to computers. And it was a whole career path change. I had 3 different resumes for 3 different possible career paths, and this was one of them. I still work for that company. It's been a great company to work for. It's fairly recession proof. I've learned that very quickly. It wasn't dependent on these different industries, but for years is what I'm getting to, every time my boss would say, "Hey Jerry, come into my office, I need to talk to you about something." Oh, here it comes. There's that feeling welling up, I'm going to get laid off. What's the point, It took years to get rid of that. And it took years of changing that little voice in the back of my head to not think that it was all coming down. It was all going to fall down around me because I had been through that. It was just once, but it hit hard. It hit my self-worth hard. And it took me years to realize, oh, he's got a project for me. I'm not about to be laid off. But that baggage can be hard to dump. It can be very hard. And it may be a while of you having to remind yourself every time that voice speaks, say, "You're a liar, here's the truth." And you'll have to be diligent about it because that voice will be persistent. Does that make sense? Okay. Obedience exhibits a quality of discipleship because discipleship is not just about learning ideas, but about submitting one's life to the authority and example of one being followed. I'll go back to my job experience for a little bit. I talked my way into that company to be phone support. It didn't required a lot of knowledge of the product, but didn't require a lot of schooling. And I had been through school. I'd got a 2-year degree. I was hoping to get a 4-year degree for engineering. And I was throwing it all away, essentially. It got me in a door, but it wasn't going to be my career path. But I remember getting to the point where, we'd be dealing with the software, and I'd be talking with customers, and I started setting a goal as like, well, when I have a problem, I need to take over to the development guys and girls and show them that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, a bug in the software. I wanted to get to the point where I'd say, it's this line of code that's wrong. It's not just, we have this general problem. When you click this button, it breaks, whatever it is, And I spent time, I'd go in there and say, I think I've tracked it down to this. And they'd say, you're close, but it's over here. But you helped me, you saved me some work. Till it got to the point where I'd walk in and say, I think here's the problem. They go, yeah, cool. That's 5 minutes of my time instead of 2 hours tracking it down. Thank you. And I remember one day I was on the night shift because we take calls 24/7 because it's life and safety for our customers. The owner of the company came by, and he caught me playing solitaire between calls, and I felt terrible. But he says, "I play solitaire too. If you're caught up on your work, I don't care." But he said, "I hear you want to be a software engineer." Oh, yeah, I kind of do. So he said, "Okay. So for starting tomorrow, you're going to be 2 hours over there on a day and the rest of your time over here in the support wing. And if you do well, we'll keep increasing your time and over in the development area." And I had to learn how to write software, how to support it from that side. But it's the kind of thing that if you're diligent, it will come. That helped heal me a lot the day he said that, that I am worth something still. I am going to be promoted. I am going to be something. And eventually, my manager over there in the software development called me in one day, and it wasn't a project. He just said, "You're not a junior programmer anymore. I'm just going to we're taking the word junior off." And then there was the day that came, "Well, you're We need to put the term senior on there. You're one of the leading developers, you know. You're the guy who doesn't just write what we tell you to write. You're the guy we come to find out how we're going to design it, you know. And those became different things, but it comes through diligence. And I can say today that I don't have that same fear. Sometimes I remember what it felt like, but you can. If you keep telling that voice you're a liar, here's the truth. Here's the truth. You're going to have to do it 100 times because you've listened to the lie 1,000 times. You're probably going to have to speak the truth 10,000 times to silence the lie. It shows allegiance when you obey, not just admiration. A disciple follows commands, and those commands can come in different forms. It can come in the form of a request. It can come in the form of, if you step there, you're going to slip and fall. Don't do that. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And as I was looking at this, I also hit up with another one of these paradoxical things in the Bible. In that same, I think in the exact same passage, Jesus tells his disciples, you are no longer my disciples, you are my friends. But at the same time, he says, keep my commandments. You know, are we equals? You still have that same sort of paradoxical relationship there. Obedience demonstrates that a disciple's loyalty is real and active, not just verbal. But again, the goal that you have in setting up that healthy relationship with someone who has been on that path longer than you have, who will show you how to do it right and how to avoid doing it wrong, is that eventually you will be able to teach someone else. You will be qualified for a ministry. You'll be qualified maybe for leadership. Maybe you'll be qualified for teaching. We're not all called to the same things. Not all of us were called to join the military. Not all of us were called to join the sheriff's department. Not all of us were called for political office. But we're each called for something. And God is shaping us to be the perfect person for that through following Him and through finding the mentor who can get you there. Does that make sense? All right. I think we're right at the end here, but it aligns the will of the disciple with the will of the teacher, and it brings transformation, and it makes you reshaped. It reflects the trust. This kind of relationship is a trust relationship. If that trust is broken, it voids the contract. It can be. There are minor breaks in trust. We're all going to stumble. We're all going to say, the coach told me to do this, and I went out and did my own thing, and it was stupid. It's going to be those things. But it's not the kind of big trust breaks, right? Where now all of a sudden you realize your teacher is not following Christ. Your teacher's following their own will, their own ego. It's time to find another teacher. Does that make sense? All right. It produces visible fruit in our lives. Jesus told his disciples they would be known by their fruit. I grew up in a church that talked about the fruit being how many people you've won to Christ. But at some point I realized that's not the fruit of the Spirit in the Bible. These are not the fruits. Yes, we should be discipling people. Yes, we should be bringing people to the knowledge of Christ. But the fruit, when the Bible talks about bringing fruit in your life, it's love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, and when it talks about power and of love and of a sound mind. These are all the fruits that are supposed to be in our lives, that people recognize who we serve because of these things in us. Obedience leads to a life that bears moral, spiritual, and relational fruit, making faith observable rather than abstract. In short, obedience is not the price of discipleship, it is the proof of discipleship. It demonstrates that a person is genuinely being shaped by the one they claim to follow. All right, so believe it or not, not everyone wants to overcome. Some people's identity is the one who's stuck in the mud. They don't want to give up that identity. Everything is wrapped up in their victimhood. And they are not going to let go of that victimhood because it garners them sympathy, or if they give it up, it requires something of them. Discipleship doesn't just happen. Obedience doesn't just happen. You're going to have to change your language, perhaps. You know, we've all been the little kid who said the milk spilled. How about I knocked it over? You know, I shouldn't have done that. Those are two different mindsets, right? Taking ownership. I made this mess. The gun didn't just go off, right? It's not those things. These things just keep happening to me. These are the voice of a victim mindset, as opposed to, what am I doing to cut? This pattern keeps happening. I'm at the center of it. What am I doing? Who can I find to tell me what this is that I need to fix? That's ownership. Does that make sense? All right. You can't just say, someday I'll get over it. You're going to have to find out the active way to start getting over it. And again, you might have to do it 10,000 times because you've listened to the lie 1,000 times. You have to say, how can I change how I respond to this situation? Every time that person says something, it just grates on my nerves, you know? And I start getting, you know, I just don't like it. How can you change how you react? Today, I'm going to start doing what it takes. Who can I make covenant with to help me overcome these things? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. How many have heard that? Okay. But the first step isn't really that first footfall. It's in getting out the map. It's in choosing a destination. It's packing your backpack. It's picking up your walking stick and locking the door behind you as you walk out your house. You know, these are the first steps. Setting your determination to get the goal. In overcoming, it begins with, I need help, and I have a spiritual teacher standing there who is willing to walk it out with me in a covenant relationship and saying, I want this transformation. I want the power and love in my life and a sound mind so I can see my way clearly and stop stumbling. I will do what it takes to get there. I will listen and obey the instructions, and I will humble myself so I can be lifted up. But it requires us to start down that road. And it requires us to commit ourselves to following behind someone who has walked that road before. So let's go ahead and stand. I'm going to close in prayer. And Elijah, if you have some soft music, you can play it. If you don't get to it, it's okay. God, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for the words you've given me to speak, and I pray that you let it absorb into all of our ears, knowing that we all have things we still have to overcome. We all have things that we struggle with. We all have our push-button issues that need to not be those push-button issues anymore. And I thank you for bringing this teaching along the path in this church. And I just thank you for the work that you are doing to raise us up to be a more powerful force in your kingdom and in this community. I thank you for the growth that is coming. And I thank you for the many people who are strong and are being raised up as leaders. And as this church grows, we will have a team of mentors who can take people under their wings and put their arm around them and say, let me help you through this. I've been through this. I know what you're going through. And that we have a building army of people who can work in your kingdom like that. We thank you so much. And I pray you bless the food we're about to eat together in the time of fellowship. Help us to minister to each other, to find each other and find the words we need to say to each other. Let it not be minor chit-chat, although that's fun, but help us to find the ways to minister to each other and to speak into each other's lives. I thank you so much for all you're doing. Amen.